Forest Park, one of America's largest urban forests. And within this park, we have Macleay Park, established in 1897. And Macleay Park itself is technically broken into upper and lower parts. And within the Lower Macleay Park, there is a place. Worn down, blighted, creepy, haunted. One of the city's most popular attractions, this place is known most prominently as the Witch's Castle, which, perhaps inspired by its placement within the woods with no other buildings around, and a castle, likely inspired by the appearance of the stones used in erecting it. This site has been a gathering spot for locals and visitors to the city alike. It appears on many a list of spots you need to see in town. It may be well known, which can be enough to deter interest in some, but that does not minimize the intriguing history of this place. So, why the spookiness? Why the paranormal? Certainly a decaying old stone structure bearing an appearance similar to a house out in the woods alone lends itself to such things. While, for the record, this place was simply built as a comfort station, complete with a picnic shelter and tool room, the main driving force behind its creepiness, so to speak, was a man named Danford Balch. And while his story goes back decades before the Witch's Castle was a thought in anyone's head, no history of this place is complete without it. The Donation Land Claim Act of 1850 opened up lands in the Oregon Territory to be claimed by people, namely white men, which led to massive displacement of the Native American population. With the pristine nature site that would become Portland first having land claims made as far back as 1843, the Land Claim Act saw a mass increase in claims taken out, one of which was taken out by Danford Balch, who claimed the land in the vicinity of the Willamette Heights neighborhood today, including the land Macleay Park would later be founded on. Born in Massachusetts in 1811, Balch met and married his wife, Mary Jane, in 1841. Moving out west to Oregon, Balch took out a claim to almost 350 acres on October 1st, 1850, where he settled with his wife and their 9 children. His oldest child was a 16-year-old named Anna Balch. With so much property to maintain in the area, come 1858, the Balches took on a boarder from a nearby family to help with this work. His name was Mortimer Stump, but manual labor would prove to not be Stump's only interest there. He soon took a fancy to Anna, who reciprocated this interest. But when Mortimer requested his daughter's hand, Danford lost it and kicked the young man out, reportedly threatening to kill him if he ever tried to marry Anna. Despite this threat, Anna would run away from home and elope with Mortimer, the two crossing the river into Vancouver, Washington, where they were married. Upon hearing this, Danford was despondent. He drank heavily and barely slept, unable to let such a thing pass. This brings us to November 18th, 1858. Anna, Mortimer, and his family were in town where they encountered a likely inebriated Danford Balch, who began to argue with Mortimer's father, who, in turn, called Anna just an ordinary bitch. While it did not happen here, Danford was ready for a real confrontation revolving around the forced taking back of his daughter. He went home and retrieved a gun and ventured back into town, encountering Anna and the Stumps on the Stark Street Ferry. What happened next depends on who you consider. While the general story is that Danford stepped up and blasted Mortimer in the face, killing him instantly, Danford's account argues that it was an accident. Claiming later that he brought the gun simply for protection, he implied the gun accidentally went off, of course, hitting its target perfectly. Before he could reflect on the actions he just took, he was grabbed and taken into custody. While Portland was still a very rough and tumble frontier town at this time, this event shocked everyone. While held in jail for his upcoming trial, Danford managed to escape with plans to flee the country, but he would be apprehended again before this happened. The story went around that the city's police chief, the morally questionable James LePais, offered to leave the jail cell door open if Mary Jane could manage to get him a decent bribe. Intermingled with his claims of an accidental shooting of Mortimer Stump, Danford also included pleas of innocence with regards to killing a man whose body was found in the canyon on Balch's land around 1856. No follow-up on that story. Come Monday, October 17, 1859, on the gallows set up at Front and Salmon Streets at 10:45 a.m., Danford Balch would be executed in the city of Portland's first ever public execution, an event that gathered around 500 to 600 spectators. This included Anna, whose appearance to see her father hung was called in local papers a, quote, disgrace to the intelligence of the age, and that her decision should be met with surprise, reprobation, and detestation from the whole community. What a way to treat a widow. And that was it for Danford Balch. So, a murderer who would be the first public execution in the history of Portland just happened to be the one-time owner of the land that now graces this stone house. A nice haunted story to go with a beautifully haunted-looking place. But it would be a long, long time after this place's construction before these two things would become synonymous with each other, which I will obviously get back to. Once Balch was executed, there was the matter of dealing with his estate, namely all the land his family had claimed. Originally, it was supposed to split between Mary Jane and the 9 children. What followed was a tragic collapse that led to the family losing most of that land in a fight that carried on all the way into the 1880s. Directly involved and shamed during this process was a young John H. Mitchell, who would go on to become an Oregon State Senator, where he would be indicted and convicted on a land fraud case before passing away in 1905. And back in the early 1860s, he helped cheat the Balch children out of their land, and by the time all was said and done, all they had left was a fraction of Mary Jane's portion. Oddly enough, in 1886 it was reported there was only one member of the family still living on this small portion, and that was Anna. But she wouldn't be there forever, while not straying far away. So we're just a couple blocks east of Macleay Park, pretty close, and this crossing street is Xavier Street, and it's just a little extra thing that ties into the Balch story, so to speak. Now I'm actually walking west, so I'm actually getting closer. I'm only like 2 blocks from Macleay Park, less than a mile from the Witch's Castle. But here I'm crossing, this is still Xavier right here, and I'm crossing 27th. So between 27th, 28th, and Xavier. And this tiny little house over here. Oh, looks like they're doing work to it. This is the house. Yeah, they are doing work on it. This is the house that Anna Balch, Mortimer Stump's widow, lived in, like, later on when she got remarried. she actually married 2 more times. So, I mean, she was able to go on and live a life, even though the last you really read about her way back in the day was that she was still living on what little land the Balch family still had left. A large portion of the Balch's former land would fall into the possession of Donald Mcclelay, a successful local merchant and banker who, like many, had at least a side interest in land ownership as well. This included obtaining over 100 acres in the area formerly known as the Balch's land claim. Shortly before his death in 1897, Mcclelay would deed the land to the city, opening it up to become park space. While considered by some a pure act of giving, Mcclelay had a personal motive behind this decision. While his bank managed to survive the Panic of 1893, he was still, now in his early 60s, fairly wiped out by the experience. And here he had a chunk of undeveloped land that he was having to pay taxes on, and long story short, he didn't want to have to do that anymore. And obtaining this land when the city did was a case of perfect timing, as Portland was entering a phase of personal growth as well as desires for further park development. City Park, eventually Washington Park, was in its early era of gradual development, and come 1903, the city brought in John Charles Olmsted of a large landscape architectural firm. He would put together a detailed report about how the city should progress in terms of its parks. While very few things Olmsted suggested would happen, Macleay Park managed to slowly develop in its own right. The 1910s would see a spike in what were known as comfort stations, a classic term for a restroom. They would start showing up in downtown, and over time there was lots of pressure to create these stations within the city's parks. And with Macleay Park still far more rural than it is today, the desire to create a comfort station out there soon became an objective. The first reference I found to such a project came from an article in the September 12, 1926 edition of the Oregon Daily Journal discussing the expenses on planned improvements in the city's parks. These improvements included building a comfort station in Macleay Park at a projected cost of $4,800. A major influence behind this project was a city commissioner named Stanhope S. Peer, who was deeply involved in pushing the development of the city's parks, which included wanting comfort stations in them. His influence was so great that he has a park in the city named after himself today, that being Peer Park up in the St. John's neighborhood. This project did not quite come to fruition, as come the start of 1928, the project was brought around again with the city's Park Bureau looking for architects to help on their planned projects, which included this comfort station. But, still in stagnation, a year later, at the start of 1929, Portland City Council stepped in requesting help for the Park Bureau in their pursuit of architects. They would eventually luck their way into a local architect by the name of Ernest Tucker, who'd worked on many other projects in the area, including the original city zoo. While probably an obscure name to most people today, heck, he even was to me up until about a week ago, Tucker is the one we all must pay credit to for erecting such a structure that, even in its present state, is something that everyone takes time to notice. That's the thing about this place, is that even if someone knows nothing about its past, when they enter the park and find this building, it grabs and holds the eye. Had he built a simple wood structure, it probably wouldn't be as appealing. In fact, it'd probably be long gone by now. But he chose to use not just stone, but thick, strong stone that would last long after abandonment. And hired to make Tucker's creation a reality was the company Angle & Son, who was awarded the contract in October 1929. Work would begin in December of that year, leading to some documentation stating that it was completed in 1929. That's a reoccurring thing in the Witch's Castle's history: inaccuracies. The structure would not be completed until early 1930. Even an article published on the last day of 1929 noted the project was well underway and approaching completion. Another article from January 12, 1930, would still report the project was almost complete. Another frequent inaccuracy, still sometimes referenced today, is the claim that this building was a WPA, or Works Progress Administration project. The WPA was established as a New Deal program during the Great Depression to provide jobs to the unemployed. It was also not established until 1935, and with the origins of a comfort station here dating back to 1926, the plans for this place not only predate the WPA, but the stock market crash and the Great Depression itself. While the original information simply called for a comfort station, it would end up clearly being more than that. With the stones brought in from Rocky Butte, this 1.5-story structure would be reported as a combination restroom, covered picnic shelter, and tool room upon completion. It would also later serve as a ranger station. The overall appearance of the structure was done the way it was, so as to, as it was quoted, be rustic in appearance to blend well with the native beauty of the park. But a lingering, unanswered question about this stone house is why it was built specifically where it was. Now, easily accessible from Cornell Road above or from the park's main entrance below, back in 1930 this location was a somewhat difficult place to reach down in the canyon. It's been theorized the very rural-looking setting itself may have been the primary motivation to build the station on that site. With the size of many of the supplies, it was quickly established they could not be simply trucked in or brought in by horse. In typical old-school fashion, instead of moving the construction site to a more easily accessible spot, a line was established, leading down from the top of the canyon to the construction site. Materials were then led down the line in a large wooden basket. An exhaustive effort, but without it, we would not have what we have today. And equally impressive was the water system that needed to be put in place, in particular for the restrooms. Water would be piped in from nearby Balch Creek, bringing water into an underground tank that could then be pumped into the building. This particular system would be updated later, and the water system itself would serve as the primary factor that would lead to this comfort station's transformation into the Witch's Castle we see today. Upon completion, it was a very charming structure that, at a given angle, really did look like a small house in the woods. The most notable aspect of the building missing from it now is the steep gable roof and the window at the front. It included arched doors on each side as well as small windows through the stone walls. Seeing what the place originally looked like threw me personally, as growing up I always just envisioned the whole structure as being made of stone. When the building ceased to be used, anything that could be repurposed or that could cause a potential fire was removed, and thus we are left with mainly just the stone elements of today. And from there, the history of this site over the coming decades was not really anything of intrigue, because we have to remember, in its time it was mainly just a comfort station for people. Nobody was tying this to the story of Danford Balch, and why would they when the building was in solid condition and not really creepy at all? The story of Balch and the killing of Mortimer Stump would be retold in newspapers over and over throughout the decades, some dating back into the first decades of the 20th century, with no mention of this stone house. It was just a building in the park serving its purpose. Most things of intrigue that happened in the coming years more happened around the witch's castle as opposed to it. Its completion in 1930 was only the start of extensive work done in the park, including construction along Balch Lake and in the vicinity of Lower Macleay Park's main entrance near the 1905 Thurman Street bridges crossing over it. So it was a time of growth for the park, which in 1948 would become a portion of the much larger and brand new Forest Park. The castle also managed to avoid incineration amidst several wildfires that happened over the years, some encroaching on Macleay Park itself. The irony here would be that if the building was destroyed by a fire way back when, it would have ended up pretty much looking the same as it does now. And then it happened. The event that would set things in motion for this place to look the way it does today. On October 12, 1962, a storm with the power of a Category 3 hurricane blew into town. Known as the Columbus Day Storm, the Portland area was devastated. This devastation struck Macleay Park as well, causing damage to the castle, primarily in relation to its water system. Instead of repairing the damage done, the choice was made to close the place down altogether, wherein most wood and metal elements of the building were removed, leaving just the stone, which, fortunately for us, no one decided to also break down. Instead, it was left out there to gradually become one with nature. It would sit out there for many years, only passively noticed by passers-by. It was only in its early stages of abandonment, and the intrigue of abandoned structures had not hit the urbex levels we have today. Come the 1980s, the structure would find its next calling, in a way. Rediscovered by local high school kids, in particular those going to Lincoln High School, this crumbling stone structure, with a hint of creepiness, became a popular hangout and party spot. It made a perfect nighttime gathering place, deep there in the darkness of the forest. It's been said that those who hung out there during this time were the ones that originally gave it the name of the Witch's Castle. However, the witchy connection to this castle dates back to an earlier time. In a February 24, 1973 Oregon Journal article written by a Jan Hess, she discusses the charms of visiting Macleay Park. In this piece, she references the, quote, moss-covered stone house that nearly was, but also expressed how her daughters referred to the building as the Witch House. So we can at least date the witchy concept of the castle back as far as 1973, and possibly earlier for all we know, even though the term itself started becoming more in vogue during the 80s. But even then, the castle was still a fairly obscure gathering place, hence its appeal to partying kids. But with an ever-increasing population, including a growing population in the vicinity of Macleay Park, as well as an increase in walkers, joggers, and hikers, more and more people started discovering this place. Historic preservation, and even just the general interest in historic architecture, had taken off in years previous, but itself was continuing to make this castle more interesting. The 1990s would see the Witch's Castle go from an obscure gathering site to a must-see attraction for anyone in town. The occasional reference in old papers discussing things to see in the park, or even mysterious deaths, was replaced with frequent stories about the charm of the stone house, also known as the Witch's Castle. It would reach such growing popularity that when the discussion was had in 1995 about finally tearing it down, it was met with resistance. But a lot of what helped the appeal of this structure grow and grow in popularity, transitioning into the new millennium and the ever-booming usage of the internet, the long-known and often-told story of Danford Balch and the murder of Mortimer Stump found new appeal in its connection to the spooky, crumbling witch's castle. Now, this crumbling yet extremely popular structure to come see anytime somebody comes through Forest Park, they pretty much want to make it to here at some point or another to see the witch's castle. But this place has still to this day, I've seen people like post pictures of this and say that this was the home of the Balch family, which were kind of early Portland area settlers. Danford Balch was the head of the household. And people will sell pictures and stuff and say that this is the crumbling remains of their home to give it more historical significance, because Danford Balch is actually pretty significant to Super Oregon and Portland history. This is not the Balch home. The witch's castle's reputation was solidified as the place to see in the park for onlookers and anyone with an interest in the paranormal. The lore of the haunted vibes here includes the idea that Danford's wife, Mary Jane, actually bewitched him into killing Mortimer Stump, and then she lived out there in the woods long after her husband's death. Somewhat like a witch. It's also suggested several spirits haunt the area, from Danford to Mary Jane to Mortimer Stump to Anna. 4 people, none of whom died anywhere near this place. And yet it is suggested that Anna's spirit wanders the woods near the witch's castle, weeping over the loss of her husband. Fact or fiction, the Balch story only spiked the popularity of this place. And while the tellings of the Balch stories in the past never mention the witch's castle, a written piece on the witch's castle now is seldom complete without the Balch story. Sticking my head into the Google review bin, the witch's castle scores a 4.3 out of 5, which ain't too bad. Under the description there, it states, "Visitors say this historical landmark offers a beautiful hike through the woods, with a unique destination, a small graffiti-covered castle nestled in a ravine." The greatest criticisms there often focus on the heavy amount of graffiti on the building, as well as it being overcrowded, which honestly should be expected, especially in the middle of a nice day. Alas, the graffiti issue has been a long-standing one. I found an article from way back in 1990 that referenced the building was covered in it. In 2016, the graffiti issue made headlines again, with opinions about it being fairly divided. For my original channel, I shot a short video about the witch's castle back in 2017, paying the site my first visit that wasn't just a pass-by while running cross-country back in the day. And I managed to have maybe a little too much fun while I was out there, but with stronger efforts being made to keep this attraction clean in only the year prior to my visit, you can see that during this particular occasion, while there was some tagging, the building remains were remarkably clean compared to how they looked during my most recent visit. Let's have a picnic. Just throw a blanket down on the stone and act like we're not being watched. And this is something where I know it's kind of dividing lines between how people feel about the graffiti, and I'm a little on the fence to it myself. I'm not a big fan of tagging everything up. I think certain things actually, like the appearance of them, improve with tagging, and there's that artistic kind of adventurous side of me kind of likes the idea of this abandoned, rotting away structure out in these like pristine woods, but totally covered with just moss and variation of different colors. But the practical, environmental, and historical side of me is not a fan so much. I also feel like, unfortunately, when there's this much tagging going on out in a place like this, how long is it before the trees and the actual environment is getting tagged? In fact, I can't tell. Is that spray paint on this tree? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that, see, like, I'm pretty sure that's, I don't know, because it's red in here, so I don't know if that's, well, because there's none up there, it's just right here, so I think that's probably somebody spray painted this tree, and that's where I draw, yeah, and then it's over here too. See, this is where I feel the greater problem is, more than the tagging of the building, is you get taggers out here, and then they start tagging the trees and the plant life, which I care 50,000 times as much about, well, more than a building getting tagged. A building can always just get cleaned off, you know, at a cost, but this is a whole other stupid situation. And the unfortunate truth is, obviously taggers know about this place. I mean, so come out here and clean this all you want. Unfortunately, they're gonna come back and tag it again. I found an article in 2016 where they were talking about, is this place really cool or is it an eyesore because it's covered in tagging? And people, I'm assuming from the parks, Portland parks, I'm guessing, either had people that did this or they hired people to do this, and they came out and they cleaned all the tagging off. And I think it wasn't even like 2 months later, they were like, we have to do it again because it's been all tagged up again. That's unfortunately what's going to happen. Someone could come out here today and clean all of this off. I guarantee you, I come out here in a month, it's going to be tagged up again. Unfortunately, with a lot of places that become oversaturated in terms of being a must-see spot, the Witch's Castle has received quite a bit of misplaced criticism as far as I'm concerned. Again, just because it's popular doesn't make it less significant. When people get told, you gotta see the Witch's Castle, they sometimes show up disappointed due to high expectations. Millends Park in downtown sometimes receives the same, that's it reaction from people, and folks are entitled to feel as they do about whatever they see. But when you're underwhelmed because it's popular, maybe you just need to look a little closer. If the whole charm is ruined completely for you because of the graffiti, maybe the charm wasn't that strong for you in the first place. It shouldn't have to take your breath away. It's not asking you to spend a whole afternoon there or to write your honors thesis about it. However it looks today, or possibly in the future, the Witch's Castle is a wondrous artifact of its time, with a historical path that not too many structures have the opportunity to experience. Something so simple becoming something so popular in a time after its abandonment. A simple structure that, even without the paranormal element, like it or hate it, will always catch the eye. So, when you're going to a place that tends to be rather popular, especially a place where people like to bring their family and their kids. The last several times I've been there, there's been kids. It's, you know, it's almost kind of a playground for kids at times, something to run through and whatnot. And you go to a place like that and it's like, well, if there's kids all over it, guess what I can't do? I can't film. So figured, what's the best way to get around that? Well, probably to get out there as early in the day as you can. So here I am, 6:43 a.m. I'm heading to catch the bus, well, the Max, then a bus, and then take a trip all the way up into northwest Portland to get to the castle. Onward to the castle. So far, I'm just seeing walkers and runners so far, so hopefully I won't have too much drama trying to shoot video. I don't remember the castle being this far down the path. Pardon the pun, but I remember it being more or less a stone's throw from the entrance. And we have arrived at the castle. So something I love in particular about this place is that when it was damaged by the storm and they decided not to fix it up, they stripped it of most everything. But you can still see the rusted out metal framing around this window. Muddy stairs, muddy stairs, muddy stairs. Cute arched doorway. Window. Let's step inside. It's a little chilly because there's no heat and the roof is gone. The moss buildup, the wildlife is just awesome. And yeah, I don't remember this being a thing in the past, but this has kind of started becoming, I'm sure this will piss some people off. As long as it doesn't get too over the top, I'm cool with it. Just a lot of pennies, coins, somebody's key, somebody wants some coffee, maybe there's some money on that. Chapstick, cherry, yeah, mug, baby figurine. It looks like there's more over here, so this is kind of a running, oh, it's like some Lego parts. Okay. Is there any, there's something in this window? An Oreo? Wonder how long that's been here. Wait a minute, is that even a real Oreo? That's a knockoff Oreo. And yeah, you can see in here, the metal frame around this window is still here, still holding. You can even see these holding them, it in place. And then even right across the top here, more wildlife. Some jackass had to leave their Mick Parfait, whatever the hell this is here. I'm guessing that's crushed eggshells. And a muddy pit. It wouldn't surprise me if this has been used to make a fire once or twice. And yeah, you can still see. This has to obviously date back to the original building. You've got some, I'm guessing this is, well, that's, yeah, because these are all piping to a degree. Obviously, you know, they ran a pretty sophisticated water system running down here, and obviously it was a restroom once upon a time, so it doesn't surprise me that there's remains of old pipes. Not that these necessarily went or are connected to the restroom, but it doesn't surprise me that there's old pipes or evidence of pipes still in existence. Then you exit out and it's not all too dissimilar to where you come in. I also love, right, you got the little strip of metal, and I think it's metal. Oh, no, never mind. Right across the strip you come in, it's that little strip that kind of, you know, keeps the cold out, I guess. I just love little things like that, that like when you're just walking around and you stumble onto a place like this, and they're the kind of things that like you miss if you're not actively looking for anything. Whenever I walk in here, I always have an illogical fear that like some big Indiana Jones boulder's gonna roll down and go while I'm in here, and I'm just gonna be trapped in here. I don't like it. Alright, light is on. More detail. Oh, that was a dog. Slightly more detail, not a lot. Someone's been building a fire and sleeping in here once upon a time. It's a little bit smelly. I'm just checking the floor for any other possible remnants of the past. typing anything really. Yeah. It's a little claustrophobic in here. I mean, as somebody who's very claustrophobic, I'm kind of like, I could hang out in here if it wasn't so, dirty altogether. But, I was just hanging out with friends and we wanted to sit in here and just hang out for a while. That'd be cool. Until something rolls in front of this doorway and keeps me trapped here permanently, then I'm gonna have a grade A freak out. Woo! Good acoustics. Caw! This is the moment someone's gonna walk right by and be like, what the hell is going on in there? No, I think I'm safe. That would have been embarrassing. So I can't say for absolute certain, but I know that when the storm did its damage and they decided not to fix it back up, they stripped a lot off the building. The roof was removed. Most, wood and metal, whatnot was removed. So I'm wondering, I have to look back at the old pictures of what it looked like before then, but I'm wondering if this is where, well, yeah, no, because there was like a wood piece that used to come out and it used to kind of wrap around like this, and it kind of made the shelter a little more welcoming. I think this is in that slat, if you can call it, of wood would have been right in this little opening right here. I'm glad I remembered that part of the picture because I was like, there had to have been something here once. So you see this little opening where that wood would have come out, and there was, if I'm correct, one to match on the other side, so I can only assume that was once right here. Would have popped out of this opening, and it certainly made this location right in this vicinity a lot more welcoming than it is now. I mean, I guess it depends on your personality. Some people would find this much more welcoming than clean stone. Well, it worked. I didn't know if it was gonna work because there was actually a lot of people here when I first got here, like a little bit before 8:30, but I was like, please, I woke up at like 6:30 this morning after working yesterday, please tell me I still got here early enough. And I did. Literally, I have 3 people the whole time I've been here, and I've been here probably 40 minutes. Like, 3 people walked through here, and none of them were like even hung out that long. So this is what I was hoping for when I came out here to shoot, was total serenity. And all the footage I was able to shoot out here, and I shot quite a bit. I'm trying to leave no stone unturned. Every clip I shot, it's been just that. Occasional runner running by, but yeah, it's been just awesome out here. Just me getting to hang out with the old witch's castle out here in nature.